Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of Yes and No Podcast. My name is Arda, and this is my bestie, Matt. Or should I
Hi.
should I say brother at this point? Are we besties or become should we, take this to the next level and become brothers?
Brothers or lovers?
um, I don't know, dude.
Right. Yeah,
you
my name
you
is Matt.
where's your rock?
My rock is over there. Actually, people cannot see it. I have a huge rock. And it's wait, let me turn the camera. All right. It's right there. All right.
Did you
Yeah,
did you
it's
touch it before
I
the?
I touched my rocks so many times, dude.
All right. How are you? How is it going?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good actually. It's
Good
fine.
mood.
Yeah, good mood. Re-recording. So actually talking about the rock, it's a
Hmm.
pretty interesting topic. So today, this episode is going to be about rocks, how they influence ourselves.
Is it
No,
the
we're
uh
not talking about that. But I think
the
it's kind of
positive energy
yeah,
of rocks and crystals and
exactly.
manifesting and
So for a while, I
yeah.
wanted to have this conversation about actually this new trend of new age. All right, that is coming back in social media for a while. So I called it like neo new age. So new age is
What's a
basic.
new age?
So
Yeah,
new
go
age is
ahead.
basically a current, I would say, artistic current and social current back in the 60s, which was people connecting. It's more like a hippie culture in some sense too,
Hmm.
which is the spiritual, awareness and open-minded to everything. It's
Hmm.
you're taking drugs, you're having those experiences, you're trying to understand what's going on in the world and all over the world, elsewhere, if I can say. So all that spiritual, basically identity that is kind of coming back nowadays that we can see a lot on social media, on Instagram, TikToks. There's a lot of new people coming up forward nowadays with like steps to, I don't know, having abundance or manifest some stuff. And also a lot of people talking about, I think we'll talk about it, but about ego death and their trip on mushrooms and DMTs and how they basically experience something that is so profound that it changed their own vision of themselves or the reality of the world in general. So
What was
New
the
Age is
year?
basically that.
What was the year that like hippies were like top peaking?
69, brother.
70s?
Yeah,
Huh?
69. I would say 60s and 70s. Yeah.
Late 60s, early 70s?
Yep.
Well, when was I wonder what was the influence back then in terms of like Eastern religions or Eastern cultures getting into more American mainstream meditation or spiritualism. Because there are like if there are a lot of connections there that they practiced back then. I feel like you can find similarities to Eastern way of thinking or philosophy.
I think it goes back to the state of the US back in those days, which was a lot of war, going on in Vietnam and all that. And there's like this subculture and this sex, liberation, especially for women. And there was like this mix of music, culture,
What do you mean sexuality specifically that women's going through that they were kind of rediscovering or
So it was basically a current that was, I would say, against um, the politics and the way of life in the US back in those days, which was more conservative. We're coming out from the classic 50s ideology that we can have, the family core and all those values and still religion embedded into that. And there was like this movement where people were seeking freedom and liberty from that. And I think that current basically started at that moment where people were like, okay, let's think twice. Like, do we think it's normal for black people to be segregated? Do we think it's normal that women are not allowed to do this or vote or I don't know, taking care of themselves out of the religion spectrum. So I think this movement was created at that moment, at that time, where it was kind of a liberation for people in general. And this liberation was going through these aspects of spirituality, trying to understand what's going on elsewhere in the world, how can we be more aware and be more open to our self of sense and in general life.
So I don't know if you watched this documentary. I don't remember the name, but it's about this group of people getting a land, middle of nowhere. I think up north, maybe close to Seattle, maybe in Washington area. And most of the residents there, people lives there, are hippies. In America, from Americans are mostly like coming from that culture. But then there are these other people who actually financing it. There's this guy from India, and he's the spiritual leader, but you can even call him the cult leader. But the way that they're creating this society is kind of like a commune, and everybody does something in this commune, and they try to find these people who want to come into their town, um, who has some expertise. People who work in law, doctors, or who is doing craft artists. So they kind of slowly create this versatile group of people coming together, living together in a peaceful way. That's the goal. Let's have a
Mm.
town that people uh, self sustain, and we do things here the way that we want to do. But then the other people around town, I think, started to question this whole thing, and most of them were like white Americans, Christians who have their own way of living, and then they're seeing these people, big groups coming to the town uh, where they live, and it slowly becomes a thing. It's slowly like the law enforcement, news outlets. They're like, who are these people? What are they doing? Because they're like growing. They're constructing more things, and it becomes a federal thing. And actually, the FBI start to investigate them and become a huge like news thing that people were like, well, these people are the problem. These people like communists, or like living this type of a life that's ruining American values and beliefs and cultures, and they're doing orgies and they're doing drugs, and you know that picture, right?
Wait, you
And
just you sold me, communist, taking drugs and having sex parties. What can I
you
say?
are in. You want to go? I mean, their practice is questionable. Like there were some things internally, power dynamics, and certain other things going on. But at the end of the day, they're doing their own thing. How this became a federal thing, that like there is no crime, there's nothing, but people were starting to bugging them, and I think it become more than what it was initially. But it's an interesting documentary if you want to watch it.
Okay, I'll
Um,
watch it.
and I think it become criminal at some point. I think there were like some people in there did some things that FBI were like, okay, this is a criminal act. We're gonna bring it to the court, and then they put some people in jail. I think, yeah, it's
So, also for you, what is the idea there? Is it like, do you think they kind of obtain a certain type of truth and then that just
I think
disrupted the
I,
society and how people were like embedded into their life, and they're like, wait, those guys are a threat because they found something in themselves that we are not agreeing on, and then
So
that
there
just
there are
went to
two
shit.
things. One of them is like back then the culture shifted, first with the hippies, but also I think the Eastern philosophy, Eastern spiritualism, getting into U.S. more, the Western, and it meets with the Western philosophy, and I think it created this group of people uh, practicing certain things differently and believing things that are different than Christian values, American values. And that was a big contradiction. And I think they got a lot of reaction towards it. But that culture starts from that. And I think there is um, like what it become today. I think it starts with basically Eastern philosophy coming into the Western culture and creating something new.
Yeah, that's true. I agree.
And that was an interesting example of like let's create a town, let's practice this, like as a like community.
It's interesting what you said about this documentary. There was one actually in France a few weeks ago that came out that is called Rel. Rel is guru basically from France. Same thing. It started in the 70s and it made people believe that the aliens were coming soon. All right. Um, and he convinced a lot, shit tons of people. He asked them for money and then more money. And then his idea was like, you know what? We're going to change the DNA and change the genes of humans because in order to become more like aliens. So it was actually one of the first starting the race toward cloning human. So they said
Mm.
that they did it back in 2005 or something like that. So it took them like 30 years almost to get to that point. And in the documentary, what's funny is like that guy was like kicked out from France. He was kicked out from Canada. He was kicked out from the US. And
Yeah,
he's
it's the
still
same thing with this other guy too. I found the name. It was Wild Wild Country.
okay.
So it's kind of similar to like he's this rich dude, or he's maybe actually raising money through his followers. It might be that too. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's similar. Anyways, go ahead.
And the guy, I mean, he's still doing it in Japan right now.
He's still doing it.
He's still doing it. It's fucking
Fuck.
crazy. But anyway, I think it's the start of this idea. It's like it felt like more cult back in those days. It felt like okay, there was this emancipation, in terms of people trying to find themselves, find their sexuality through music, through drugs, through spirituality, and then people capitalized on it, and they were like, okay, let's go into that idea. I'm actually the one, and I can tell you what to do, and then it became something more like a cult. And I think there's a difference right now regarding what's going on actually nowadays, which I think it's definitely less cult oriented, but it's more like a third way of religion. So there's like Islam, there's Christianity, there's like Judaism, there's Hinduism, there's all of those religion, and then there's this other thing which is spirituality. Like a lot of people that I'm talking with, when they say they don't believe in anything, they say, "But I'm spiritual," and I think
Yeah.
it just you know bring everything and nothing at the same time all together. And this neo new age, it's still based on those same ideas that in the 60s. I think there's like some common points that are still there in terms of the law of attraction, the consciousness, the manifestation, the ego death, and all those characteristics that's still prominent in those type of beliefs in terms of spirituality. There's also astrology that is so huge, right? Like actually, like
Yeah. Yeah.
wh-
Yeah.
what is your sign?
Scorpio.
Scorpio and what?
Um, I think Aries.
Oh my god,
No,
dude.
not Aries. Might be Sagittarius actually. Which one was
Sagittarius.
the arrow one?
Yeah, Sagittarius.
Then I think it's Sagittarius.
And you know what?
The moon one, right? The the
Yeah,
the
and
day,
there's
the
yeah,
hour that whenever
rising
you're,
sign and the moon one. There's the sun is the main, and then there's the
I think it's
rising sign and moon.
Sagittarius. I need to
All right,
check co-star.
dude. And exactly, co-star is actually part of that.
We are
Uh,
not supported by this is not a co-star
yeah,
commercial.
yeah. And people are gonna say something if we have a chemistry, dude. It's because what is my sign?
Sagittarius.
I'm Sagittarius, and what is my
What's your
rising? Fucking
Scorpio?
Scorpio, dude.
Really? Huh.
Boom.
Interesting. All
Yeah,
right.
you
I
see.
mean, that's the part. I think this is a very good example, because one can see it as, well, how many people out there has Sagittarius to Scorpio, Scorpio to Sagittarius, and they're great friends. Like you can look at that data and say
Mhm.
like, well, there are like thousands of people, but only like 1% is really good friends, and you don't get to the conclusion just because of that you become really good friends. But this is an interesting thing about epistemology. Like You can go through experience, that's a source of information. You can go through testimonial, which is what other people are experiencing, right? And then the information that you're getting from them about their experiences or what they know about reality. And then there is reasoning, and that reasoning is not just getting the information and how to process is that which collectively humanity tried to get better ways to how to reason. But then we have science. Like, I think science is a form of reasoning in some sense. We're going to collect data, we are going to came up with an idea, and then we are going to see if we can demonstrate that idea is working or not based on the data, based on the evidence, and then we're going to come to a conclusion. That type of prediction, that type of um, trying to understand reality through that makes more sense to me. That's my epistemology. But when I see a lot of people don't find that appealing, and I don't know if it's like thought that they learned this through society or there's something neurological going on. It's more embedded, more built-in thing.
I think, all right, I think what you're saying is interesting because it always been this war between religion and science in some way. Um, and I think it goes to that. Like, for example, like to get to these spirituality themes in general, there's like this consciousness, idea of consciousness. Consciousness, you can define it as a scientist in a way, and you have like religion and this spirituality, movement going on that are gonna try to describe it in another way in some sense. Like there's this uh Kundalini, which is a form of divine feminine energy in Hinduism.
Kundalini yoga?
And it's kind of related to the Kundalini yoga for sure,
Oh, like
And
you meant Kundalini as more like the philosophy of it in some sense.
exactly, yeah. And it goes
And you
through
said
the
what? Feminine what?
divine feminine. All right. That's
Oh,
something
divine
you can
feminine.
see, it's like yourself as a woman, your inner chakra and all of that, embedded in yourself, and that is making you who you are, right? And I think there's a relationship through that, which is I saw a lot of people talking about how people with anxiety and stress oriented depression, they're trying a way to regulate their nervous system, right? And there was studies saying that basically when you have a belief of something that is greater than to yourself, kind of religion, it can help you actually to regulate your nervous system, right?
Hmm.
And I think this is where there's like this small in between of what is spirituality and the effect on it, and also how science actually influence your condition in terms of your mental states and or mental illness in general. So there's this part, and yes, for sure, spirituality, religions that can help people to regulate themselves in terms of how their brain function and all that, but it's only based in a way of believing that you can be better. And the process on the other side, from the scientific point of view, will be yeah, there's methods that you can help regulate yourself if you're doing this or breathing exercise or some stuff like that. So there's like this in between that makes spirituality so, I mean,
Appealing.
so enticing for people in some sense.
I understand that, even the community aspect of any time of supernatural or like religion or spirituality, that is not only helps you with yourself, with processing information, feeling better, but it also you may be in a group of people in a community, and that in itself also has benefits for people too. I mean, especially religions, I guess the Christianity, Muslim culture, like there is this huge sense of group psychology. Like it's not like a small group at that point. It's like half of a country or even more in some cases believes the same thing. And that thing is very, like, how should I say, ancient. There are a lot of things about it that sometimes they even go and say, like, you can't explain that. Like, I can give you some explanation, but you cannot go beyond that. Like, I remember watching this guy, I don't remember his name, but he was a Muslim religious leader, or we call them imam, but I
Mhm.
think he has theology degree too. Like, he studied theology too, and he was having an interview, and the interviewer, he asked him, "How would you define God?" All right, just to start, like, he
Mhm.
wanted to see where he is in terms of what God is. And he said, "Well, I cannot. I cannot define God, because when you define something, you put borders to it, right? Like, this is a glass, and then once I say it's a glass, like, there are some intrinsic properties to that comes with it." So he basically talked about it a little bit, that why he cannot define God. But the best way, like, if you really need me to define it, he said that I can say a divine being above all, or something like that. Not even above all. That he didn't. I think he said a divine being. Again, from my point of view, I'm not a religious person, but that is so vague. Like, that doesn't explain anything about how God does the things that it does. It just does it because it is like all be all. Basically, the everything is, and that's why I'm more like, I kind of understand where spiritual people come to. There are like some um sects of religion. Like, there is what was his name? He's Muslim too. Anyways, he kind of approaches Muslim Islam as a religion, more philosophical sense. And he kind of takes the God claim, or what God is, in a similar way. A divine being, in everything, above everything. And there are like so many versions of this, but I guess my point is, religion, spirituality, even though it gives some answers to people, it doesn't explain things that much.
I mean, isn't it the goal actually of being spiritual at the same time? Like the goal
Maybe,
is not
yeah.
to understand, but it's more to get this feeling or get this emotion that you can go through that delivers you from a state of mind that you are. Like one of the things they're actually using a lot in spirituality, and especially nowadays, I think this element of community, I can talk about it a little bit further too, but I think social networks is definitely kind of this place where people can connect with each other regarding those themes. But one of the things that goes back a lot is this idea of general consciousness or reality of the prism that you can watch yourself and others and the reality that you're living in. There's this idea of separation, what your eyes can see and what you can feel, or where you are living in, what is your realm of reality, what surrounds you and all that. And I'm not saying they are right or wrong really about it. Like this can be a discussion, but obviously, if we take a look at clear data and scientific perspective, like we can, it obviously is bullshit, but in some sense, it's kind of reassuring people that what they're living, they're experiencing, is actually true. It's some way um, make them believe that, or reconforting them into thinking that what they're going through is real, but there's something greater than that surrounding us, all of us. So you can thrive and you can move on from what are the shackles of your own problems or your identity or trauma or whatever it is. So, in some sense, yeah, not defining things actually make this idea of reality completely obsolete. It's not like you're living in a world, unfortunately, that is, you know, full of war and conflict and problems, but at the same time, beautiful things. It's a way for those people actually to focus on things that are so light that they can feel more or differently, and they can surpass their problems, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting how a lot of people need that. I mean, even if I look at the debates that I watch, lots of debates between atheists and religious people, right? And one thing that is like always the same is they get to a point. There are like countering arguments, right? And then they
Hmm.
get to a point. First of all, nobody convincing the other
Each
side.
other, yeah.
All right. So they made their arguments in some sense. But generally where it goes is, how do you know these things about this? And then the other person goes like, well, because it's told me, uh like I receive that somehow, like
Hmm.
either through God or either through that consciousness or spirituality, something. There is this sense of, I know this. And then the other side is like, it's okay not to know. Like, you don't need to know it. We're still trying to figure it out. We're trying to still get there. But they're like, no, I mean, I think it's pretty good explanation.
But it's
Like, I
based on
can,
the book. That's it, most of the
sure,
time.
sure, yeah. But yeah, but still, that's generally the argument that they go to. I have
but I,
some explanation. You have no explanation.
but I think that's actually what's changing. I think if there's this new spirituality trend going on right now, it's definitely based on social problems, like people struggling mentally, they're struggling in their life socially, they're struggling financially, they don't like this idea also about what's going on in the world. There's a lot of stress and anxiety, created
Oh
through
yeah.
that. But something that is different from that back then, and I think it started like in the 2000s or something like that. There's like this book, famous book, and we talked about it before, which is called The Secret.
Yeah.
All right, so The
And then there
Secret.
was a documentary around the same time named "What the Bleep Do We Know?" That's like right before that. But yeah, Secret is interesting too. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and The Secret is this idea of law of attraction. It's
Yeah.
it's basically you can create your own reality, your own relationship with others, and the basis of that is actually kind of, they're trying to at least make a sense that is more grounded to science than actually religion. Religion, they're always bringing up their books and be like, well, that's the Bible, that's the Quran, that's this or that, and it existed because, and they're trying to find history through that and be like, yeah, those are existing, and this is real because that existed at one point in time. But I think this new trend of spirituality is trying to be more and more based on science, which is obviously not true, right? Like if you really look at what the
Yeah, I
science is
was going to
saying,
say it's
it's
almost
not.
like dangerous to real science in some sense.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely pseudoscience, 100%. But like this idea of the secret and the law of attraction was saying, like, well, actually, everybody, has this energy, in terms of magnetism or something like that.
Hmm.
And what you're creating from this magnetic field that you have in yourself, it's interacting with everything around you. It's interacting with the objects, it's interacting with people. And the way you're creating that basically magnetism around you, is going to influence your life. And I think that's where it started to be not dangerous in itself, but I think it definitely switched this idea of just, well, I saw this book saying, and the truth is in this book. It's trying to be more grounded to reality, we could say, uh, because it's trying to bring some science into it. And the problem there is in that is science is can prove some stuff, but also sometimes cannot prove some other stuff. And they're tapping into this idea that, well, if it's not proven by science, there's still this hypothesis, or this idea that maybe science couldn't find it, and we find the truth behind what's going on. So all of those ideas nowadays, I think they're created by that. They're like, okay, I came up with this theory because science cannot prove it and it cannot disprove it either. I'm telling you, it's like that. And people
Yeah.
sometimes, and I think most of the time when they're vulnerable, they're going to be like, yeah, that makes sense, actually. That's exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a few days ago, I was talking with a friend. He was talking about mushrooms. And he said, well, when you get a mushroom, it opens your chakras.
Your
I'm
chakras.
like, why did you bring the chakras in that conversation now? It's just like the way we communicate too. Like he doesn't say, well, when you get mushrooms, it affects your neurology and the way that you process information. So it might open your brain to get more sensory info. Like doesn't explain it this way, but he goes like it opens your chakras, which you can relate to what I just said as chakras opening, like you are getting more information, something. But anyways, you get the point. How we communicate certain things can be sometimes confusing too. And I sometimes feel like people leaning into that because they don't understand the science. They don't want to talk about, like, I don't want to say stuff that I don't really understand. But what I understand is these like spiritual verbiage or religious words that describes actually something there.
Mhm.
But to me, it just confuses. Like it's just confusing to me. It's harder to communicate. At least for me. Maybe some people they communicate fine.
Well, actually, let's talk about ego death because I think it's one of the most interesting thing that goes into this new type of spirituality, and I think even the terms ego death is something that is doesn't
What
mean
is it?
anything.
The do you know how it started?
Uh,
Because I heard it, but
So basically, yeah, ego death. Just to talk about it, there's a lot of people online saying like, "Well, I went through this experience and I experienced ego death." And some people are going to say, "Well, you're losing your ego. That's the that's the goal." Sometimes
mhm.
it's you have other people going to say, "Well, you just went through an experience that just shatters your self identity and who you are." All right, and so there's not clear definition of what is ego death.
Can you Google it? Do you have any
Well, I don't know, but I
oh,
have like this definition in some sense. Basically, it kind of the experience in which you lose your sense of self by cultivating a deep sense of awareness and the complete loss, sorry, of subjective self identity.
okay.
Does that make sense to you guys?
Complete loss of
Subjective
subjective
self
self-identity?
identity. Yeah,
How do you use subjective self-identity?
I think you're not
Like
losing
a
your.
subjective, like everybody has a subjective experience, and like you can't, I don't think you can lose it, but as the I even the identity, I think we were creating identity. Our identity is like day to day, it's just a part of us, like if you
Maybe.
don't do anything and just sit, I guess then you're really losing your identity. But
Well, maybe they're talking about the fact that you should. It doesn't apply to the DMV, where you're getting your ID. I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know. The ego that sounds to me it's impossible. Like if you would look at it to a spectrum and say, well, there are degrees to it, then we can talk about it. Maybe that you can have less ego in life and try to find ways how to avoid egoistic things, egocentric things. Fine. But ego, like everybody has ego. I don't think you can kill your ego. And that in itself word is like to me misleading.
Well, there's multiple definition of ego too. There's like ego in terms of pride too, in some sense, like your self identity and the pride you have from it, in terms of like, hey, I am who I am. Fuck you, bitches, or some shit like that. Like if
Mhm.
you have self perspective on yourself and the fact that you're kind of deconstructing your own image, at that point, you'd be like, well, actually, I'm a dick. And
It's more of an identity to me.
I think it's more definitely identity, but it's basically one part of ego. But what bothers me is this idea for spiritual people that it's something that is more profound. It's not just your identity, it's your self reflection of who you are in the world, in society, in the universe, they would even say, in terms of the stars and in the crystals and whatever it is, surrounding us
Hmm.
that can affect us. So I think it's kind of embedding multiple idea of spirituality, like abundance, manifestation, spiritual ascension, all those things, and even quantum leap. And I think this is the idea of you find yourself with you're the perfect person. You thought that you were the perfect person, and then something happens, and most of the time it's through, let's talk about it, but it's drugs, and then you have this self reflection that shatters your vision of the world and your life in general and your reality. They would say. Um, Actually, what's funny, I just read that the term itself is coming from a book that is called The Psychedelic Experience, manual based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, written by
Did you
a
did
guy.
you did you read this book named
Dude, shut the fuck up. Let me finish my fucking
the
phrase.
the Doors
Wait,
of
wait, wait. No,
Perception?
let me say.
Okay, okay.
So I just,
Sorry.
yeah. So I just saw that actually the term was coming from a book that was called The Psychedelic Experience, which was like a manual on the Tibetan sense of awareness, completely loss of subjective self identity. Wait, no, I just fucked
Hmm.
up. Let me start again. So actually, I saw that the term itself was coming from a book that was called The Psychedelic Experience, manual based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, by a guy, self-proclaimed psychonaut, which was called Timothy Leary.
Psychonaut?
Yeah, psychonaut,
Like
dude, like
astronaut?
astronaut, and
A
then
psychonaut?
yeah, exactly.
Fuck.
And that's
Okay.
the thing.
Sorry.
So, like, even like there, you coin a name for something that doesn't exist. The guy is a psychonaut, right? Like, what the fuck does that mean? All right.
Great.
Um, but I think, yeah, the terms come from there, and it's still, as I said, trying to go to this ideal psychology, which is this idea of self identity and ego coined by Sigmund Freud back in those days. But it's trying to be like, well, if you take those drugs, because psychonaut maybe is coming from, I don't know, psychothrop or something like that. It's like you having this experience through drugs or through trauma or through near death experience. And then you come out from it with another sense of how the world and who you are, basically.
And that reminds me this book also about psychedelics. It's called The Doors of Perception, I think. And it's this guy who is trying different psychedelics and mescaline mainly, I think, but shares his experiences. And there, like he talks about different things. But uh, what I remember to stick with me was how he describes the process. Like he basically says, day to day, we have a perception that our brain, our body absorbs information. Now, when you consume these mushrooms, they mess up with that system. I mean, it's your body's trying to get rid of it, but also the chemicals in it is just affecting your brain, your body, and your perception changes. So you are basically either numbing or changing the chemistry in those machineries, the receivers, so they're not receiving the information how they normally do. So you perceive these different things, but I think it's also that ego, that or you are experiencing something. We were talking about shadow work, like the
Uh huh.
shadow work, that you have this deeper self identity that you created when you were a kid or younger, or some trauma, something happened, and you don't have access to it. But when you use those chemicals, your sensory system, your blocking systems, they're like either numb or like they're not receiving it properly. Now you're all over the place. So you have a
Hmm.
little bit maybe easier access to it. Maybe for some people, it's harder to access that information because of the walls they built. So when we look at these people, we go like, oh, you fucking did a mushroom and then now you're enlightened, because other people go through those walls by like a therapy, by, reading and understanding and meditating, like different mechanisms, right? But for some reason, for some people, it's harder to get there. And maybe some psychedelics are helping them. I don't know. That might be a reason. At least my reasoning would be, my explanation would be that how some people get to that.
I mean, for me, it's something that is dangerous. Like, I'm not against drugs in general, not mushrooms or anything, but the idea that you need to go through an experience that basically created by a psychothrop that is going to fuck your head and your brain in order to understand some part of yourself, I think it's completely illusional. Like, there was this thing that was so funny. I saw a lot of post on social media. They were like, well, I took this amount of ayahuasca or, mushrooms, and then I had this crazy thing happening to me, and it felt like I just did in 3 hours 10 years of therapy or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I've been in therapy for many years, all right? And it is a process and it takes time. And there's so many things that I learned by myself through that journey. And I don't think just taking some high dose of DMTs, is gonna make you process a lot of things that you've been through your life. There's so many complexity. There's so many things that are embedded in your unconscious, actually, that you need to understand patterns. You need to have patterns recognition about like what happened, why so many times, and all that. And I don't think it's because you're taking a dose of something that it just dismissed, this real work you need to do because you need to understand it. I don't think going through an experience like that, sure, you can have those ideas, maybe this ego death for certain people. They're going to have like, well, actually, like now I understand. Okay, sure. But that doesn't mean you worked on it. That doesn't mean you understand those patterns that you're doing and doing and doing, where those come from 100%. Sure, you may be feeling an emotion that were hidden somewhere in you, but that doesn't mean, like the work is done. And that's something that bothers me because there's a lot of people attracted, not about the law of attraction, but attracted uh, by those idea of, okay, if I'm someone spiritual, I can control my life. And if I'm taking drugs, then I can understand more stuff about my life and be free of my demons or something like that. And it's a completely delusion that you can have.
Yeah, that type of generalization, I don't think it applies. I mean, most of the time it's not going to work. But if it worked for some people, I mean, I can only think of it as they go through an experience that they didn't go through other methods that they use. I mean, some people don't even go to therapy, don't even read about these things, don't even
Yeah, I
do
agree.
self work. I don't think if they're just gonna get mushrooms, just gonna enlighten all of a sudden. But I mean, you still need to do some work. I think.
Yeah, I agree. Like
Um,
people are claiming that sometimes. But I think yeah, it's not done. So maybe you
yeah,
being through
probably not.
something helped you understand some stuff, but at the end of the day, that doesn't mean, it's completely done. I think there's still more to do. um, People are going to also say that, well, it's this idea of Western psychology and it's a way to do it, but on the Eastern side and other countries, it's other culture, well, it's different. Then maybe, it's not valuing one or the other. But I don't think that's even the goal. I think psychology in itself, it's not a pseudoscience. I think it became something more nowadays, and it helps so many people everywhere on the planet. It doesn't be, just the US or Europe in general. That you can trust the process in some sense. In that idea that just, oh, I'm taking drugs and I'm done with it. No, it may all help you to go through some other stuff, and then you'll need to work more. But I don't think it's completely done. I think psychology in itself is still valid science in some way. And
Because, like, think about it. For example, narcissist people.
yeah,
Generally, if you go to therapy, one of the hard parts of having a narcissist in a therapy, you can't really, even though you know they're narcissists, you can tell them that they're narcissists, right? They're gonna resist to it. They're not gonna. Like they're so obsessed with their self-image that you telling them that you're a narcissist just not gonna work for them. And their brain, they just justify things for own benefit. And this, like the structures that they build, is so actually self-serving. Therapy, I they you can even go and say like, I'm not gonna fucking do therapy. It doesn't work for me. And narcissists can say that.
Are you talking
You
about my
know.
mom?
I don't know. But you got my point. It's just sometimes maybe you should give mushroom to your mother and see how that works. But I
Hey,
think
mom,
that
are you
breaks
okay?
that
Well,
wall.
I'm fucked up.
I think
Um,
that breaks that wall with those people. But just try it.
do
Try.
you think? I don't think
I'm kidding,
actually.
man.
I don't think it does really. Like
I mean, I don't know. I don't
that's
know.
exactly, yeah. I think that's the perception. It might do something, induce something in them. The problem with narcissistic people, it's something that is a coping mechanism most of the time that is embedded into their trauma. And then they experience something, and the way they leave, they're not aware and self aware of what's going on. But I don't think it's because you giving them like this high dose of DMTs that, bam, automatically they will understand who they are, how they function, and how fucked up it
No,
is.
no,
Because
yeah.
it needs also to shatter not their reality as they're living, but to understand the reality of others in order to have self perspective. So I don't think this ego death through a narcissist is going to change a lot of things. I think it might help maybe to understand some trauma they've been through, but this idea of this psychological problem there's through a narcissist is more embedded in terms of a coping mechanism from stuff they've been living with. And maybe they will understand, sure, what happened to them. But will that change and affect their behavior in society with others? I'm not 100% sure, to be honest.
I mean, if they work on themselves, you mean?
No, just taking DMTs.
I mean, the DMT and the mushrooms, I would say again, just an aspect of that process, but not like expecting a lot from it. And on top of that, we don't really know about psychedelics from the scientific point of view, that like there's so many varieties, so many different effects to it, that scientifically there are not enough research on psychedelics and its effects on the brain.
To be honest, I would say yes and no. I
Like
agree
in
in
terms
some
of we
sense.
know,
Yeah, in some sense, I agree with you. Like, there might not be enough research, but there's like those famous, CIA testing back in the 70s, actually, where they're giving like psychedelics to people and do test about how they react and how they perceive other stuff. How, like, there's medium, where people can connect with other brains and all that. So there's some research for them. Yeah, you never heard about that? Oh my god, dude.
no.
You should look it up. It's fucking crazy. So, okay, those were maybe dumb research, but I think through years and more nowadays, there's people looking into it. Like, there's a lot of study that says, taking some mushrooms or some stuff like that is going to change your brain synapses, and then it will help you maybe with depression or all that. So I think it might be a cure, maybe not a cure, but at least, relieve the symptoms of some of the
Or
mental illness we're
therapeutic.
going through. Yeah, definitely. But to really change someone, I don't think it's
I
there.
mean, it
And I
still
don't think
needs work again.
but
Like it's
I don't think that I will ever fucking find something actually about it being like, well, you take that dose and then you're done. We're 100% sure because we did the testing, and in terms of scientific, theory and results, then we saw that it's 100% working. I don't think everything, 100% works. Like, we can even talk about antidepressant. Like, people just realized last year or 2 years ago that actually antidepressant, we don't even know why it's working. Like, we don't know what is the cause of depression. And antidepressant, which normally help you regulate the serotonin in your brain, well, actually, we saw that it doesn't really affect it and it doesn't really change it. So even stuff that we created, we don't even know how they work. It works, sure, but we don't even know why. And I think for those um, DMT product like shrooms or ayahuasca or some stuff like that, sure, there might be studies, but to be 100% sure about their effectiveness and how it really works, and if you can solve problems of people just with it, I think we're not even close to be there. And right now, it's
Yeah.
just speculation at that point. And the problem with
No, I agree.
those type of drugs is they're still drugs. Like, sure, there's like this idea of they're changing your brain chemistry. They're changing your connection in terms of your neurons or some stuff like that. So it activates more part of your brain. Sure, 100%. But is there side effect? Obviously, yes, we know. All right. And is there like some long term problems that can rise from taking those? We have no idea. So there's like this dangerous aspect to it, which is definitely a deviance that can go through the spiritual awakening that people are trying to get through those experience on ayahuasca or something like that. So there was this guy that I really like, all right, and he's called Gabor Mate. He's a psychologist. He's
Mm,
working most
okay.
of the time on addiction and trauma, and he's really, really interesting and he's super knowledgeable. And I just see a couple of months ago that he was doing those ayahuasca rituals. So he's going to Mexico and he has this shaman that comes and he lays down for 3 hours taking these high dose, of ayahuasca, which is full of DMT. DMT is basically the chemical that is actually changing part of your brain and how you physically, live that experience. And I was shocked in some sense because I was like, this guy is super grounded to science and super grounded to reality in some sense, but he's doing it. And sure, that actually made me think maybe there's something to it, 100%. But the way he's describing his experiences is also super connected to the spiritual realm, which is completely not made up, but kind of bullshit in the same way. And I don't know. I don't really like that idea too, of promoting that if you don't have grounded science or data to support what you're trying to promote.
All right, let's break it down. Let's break it down a little bit about. So we're talking about, like, say, ego that using mushrooms to fix your psychology, to be a better person. But what's the general point? Like, are we trying to be a better people, or are we trying to um, solve certain problems and issues that we're having in our day to day lives, or is it about how we're feeling? It's because, like, we feel like shit, then we're trying to find why we feel like that way. Like, what are we tracking?
No, for me, I think it's the deviance there is from the spiritual idea. So, sure, spirituality can help some people to overcome some problems, same as religion. But the problem that I have is there's like this switch that can go from spirituality to drug. And through that drug experience, people think there's an enlightenment. But then let's be honest, it's dangerous to take some shrooms or LSD or some ayahuasca. You can have your psychosis. You can come back from this with your brain completely fucking fucked. That's the reality of it. Like if you look at people, sure, maybe there's going to be enlightenment in between it, but then you got to have a people that are going to be shattered by those experiences, not in terms of their self because wow, it's so profound, but just because it definitely affects your brain, definitely affects who you are. So you come in here to find um, a medication or something to solve your own problems and trauma, and then you come back from it with a fucked up, dysregulated brain. And that is the dangerous aspect to it. And I think that's what is related back to this hippie movement back in those days. Like they were trying things, they were trying to separate themselves from this identity of how the US were embedded into these patriarchal and super conservative ideas. They use that. But do where are we nowadays? We're still doing the same thing. I don't think society changed. I don't think the brain of people changed, even through the experience. I don't think we're better off than in the 70s. And I don't think, this will change anything. So there's definitely some aspect that are good and interesting because that can bring people to psychology, that they can try to find themselves to be better. But there is like this idea also of for them it feels like, well, I'm just doing it and then bam, I'm done. And I solved every issues that I have. And there's so many underlining problem regarding taking drugs in general and the spiritual idea, because there's a lot of deviance. Like there's, I have an example. All right, there's this girl actually, which was called Guru Jagat or something like that. So she was a yoga teacher based in Los Angeles, and
Of course.
through of course, and through the pandemic, all right, like in 2020, she started to do her yoga teaching lesson
Is she
uh,
shaman?
online. No,
Is she a shaman
she's a
named
guru.
Jennifer?
Yeah, from the valley. But so she was doing those yoga classes before, and then she started to do it online during the pandemic. And the problem, there's this idea of um, she started to get, like, she was super famous, super popular. There was like millions of people watching her, and she changed the life of so many
Following.
people and following her. And the problem was she started to, because she became so famous, so rich, so fast, that she started to move not just away from her spiritual identity, but also to go to those idea that, well, there's the government is lying to us, and there's this idea, and vaccine is actually a product from aliens. And the problem at that point, you have tons of people following you, trusting you 100%, and you're selling them this world that is not
Misinformation, yeah.
real, that is definitely misinformation. And some of those parts were actually bringing people to far right ideas. So the problem there is with that is the same as a cult leader, as we were talking about in the 70s, is you taking people that are going through stuff, that having difficulties in life, and you can capitalize on it for your own benefit. So this idea of those drugs, those people, trying to be like, well, I have the solution and it's not here, it's, you just need to follow the path of this guru, or this idea that, well, the stars or the energy is connecting to each other and then it's going to make you feel better. Well, most of the time, like, it's just a pyramid scheme at the end of the day. So basically the problem is they're going to benefit from the fact that you're naive and that you're going through bad times and things in your life. It's going to put you in a way and in a place that you don't want to be, and it's going to make you feel even shittier. And this idea of spirituality and drugs is going to reveal who you are as a person is completely made up, because the only point for this is just to sell you something at the end of the day. So you're trying to find yourself, and you're losing yourself because you created that identity connected to others that are just here to capitalize on yourself. And to go back to this idea of the podcast, I think you're losing yourself in terms of your authenticity, because you're trying to find it and people are going to capitalize on it, and they might fuck you up and actually destroy who you are and your own self identity, and through that your authenticity of who you are really. And that's, for me, that's the bad part of all this trend that goes nowadays regarding spirituality and all that. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where I land in that. I would say I don't care if people do mushrooms or not, but if someone is capitalizing on someone and using them, convincing them to something that's not true and manipulating them, yeah, it's wrong. I think a lot of people are trying to find things about themselves, to understand themselves. Why are they doing what they're doing, or why they are feeling certain things? In some cases, day-to-day basis. And I would be more leaning into science and try to understand. But as you said, there are like so many pseudoscience there too, so you need to be careful. But yeah, I think mushrooms are interesting. I don't think it will solve your problems, but I think they're interesting
All right. So, like,
to
let me ask this
process
question.
reality.
Well, let me ask this question. Did you have any
Mm.
enlightenment taking shrooms in your life?
I did, yeah.
You have enlightenment? Or you took some mushrooms?
Not enlightenment, but realizations about certain things.
All right, then give me an
Yeah.
example.
Well, it was in Amsterdam the first time that I did, and it's not maybe a personal thing, but it was about
My
how
father.
actually there are more to it, to things. Like when you look at certain things, you get certain patterns or certain movements that is not there, but you process actually the same information coming into your eye, coming into your ears, but you kind of process it differently. There are like a lot more. So I guess what I realized is I have biases about things around me.
Hmm.
And sometimes I need to go beyond it to understand if there's more to something. But besides that, that was the one time that I did. But besides that, I didn't like see anything deep down because I remember this guy, for example, what was his name? He's an actor, and he did shows mostly. I would say maybe movies too, but he was kind of talk about his experience when he did the shrooms, and he finds himself in this meeting room, and then there are like
Hmm.
these things in the meeting room that he doesn't know how to describe it, but each of them was kind of dictating something to him about who he is and how he should do what he should do. So his realization is kind of he built these mechanisms in self that because he recognizes that as when he goes to a business or a project that he had these things influencing him in the room, in the people, the personalities that he's interacting with. And then he realized maybe three or four different aspects of that interaction and then
Hmm.
made himself conscious and aware about like I need to be careful about these type of um,
Behavior.
interactions in general or personalities and how I am reacting to it too. It just triggers something in him to think more about it in some sense. Just because he was in that scenario that's almost like a dream state. Like it could be like that's the thing. It doesn't have to be even a mushroom. Like you can go through that by having a dream. Like
Yeah.
you can have a dream and then you'll be like, fuck, like I didn't realize that before. Like that's interesting, you know?
But that's what I'm saying. Like, for example, the molecule that we're talking about, like in shrooms or ayahuasca or all of that, or
Psychedelic,
LSD.
a
Yeah,
DMT.
it's psychedelics. Yeah, it's DMT, and DMT is actually created in your brain. Maybe not your brain, but somewhere in your body, and you already have some, and it's actually the reason why you're having dreams. So when you're in the state of sleep that is deep and you're dreaming, it's actually because of release of DMT. So what I don't understand is like, no, I mean I understand it, but like you said, I think we don't have to take those enlightening advices or drugs in order to try to realize something. Maybe go
Yeah, I
through
mean
your
it's
life. You need to go through your life in general, and maybe you're gonna have something at one point that's gonna change your perspective on everything. And this can be through dreams, as you said. Like I had so many dreams, which I was like, I was waking up and I was like, fuck, that was so interesting. Like this aspect
yeah,
or that relationship with that person in my dream, I was like, it makes sense.
yeah.
And
I don't see dreams.
I see dreams. I see people in my dreams. I
I don't
interact with
remember
them.
dreams anymore. That's so I
You
don't like
don't?
it. I don't. Like back when I was younger, I was dreaming a lot. And they
Maybe
were
you took
like
too much rooms. There you go.
Mm,
Point taken.
no. Maybe weed, I would say.
Maybe
Weed
weed.
can do that, you know? Weed can do that
Yeah,
for
yeah.
some reason.
Erasing your mind.
Um, yeah, I don't remember. I'm pretty seeing dreams, but I don't remember them.
Dude,
And
like
I
I
think,
have
yeah.
some of those vivid dreams where I'm interacting with some people and I remember exactly the conversation. Like for so many years, I thought this was bullshit. I know we're we're just like changing the subject for a second, but like right now it felt like that I had more dreams where I was literally communicating with people and I remember the conversation. I can even read something on the package and I was
Mhm.
like, well, I know what it means. It says cookies. and I can read it in my dream. I'm like coming back from my dream. I'm like, well, I remember something was written in it, and it was this. Like I don't know, but you know what I'm saying. It just goes back
Yeah.
to this idea of what you were saying. Maybe you need to go through realization. Maybe DMT help it in some way, but do we have to be forced by this idea that people
No,
promoting
yeah. I mean,
online?
generally, yeah. I don't. I agree with you. That shouldn't be the to go mentality. To I'm gonna do this, and all of my problems are gonna be resolved. Or and I actually have a friend that I can ask him too. That he's doing microdosing, and I'm like, all right. I mean, if you think that helps you, but I feel like it's more of a calming thing for him because he has like
Yeah.
anxiety and stress, and he's experiencing that day to day basis, and he is a little bit of anxious person too. So I can see, and sometimes maybe the way that he processes information in different situations, just sometimes brain can be overwhelming if it's like, too talkative about
Yeah,
stuff.
I know.
So in that sense, it might be helping him. I don't
Yeah,
know,
no, I'm
but
not saying that it doesn't help, but I'm just saying that there's this idea nowadays that this spirituality and new age again that is coming up. It's based definitely on something like a stress related cycle that society is in for sure, but it might help some people, but there's not a lot of people saying that it's fucking you up, like financially or mentally or even physically in terms of taking those. Sure, microdosing, there's definitely some aspect to it that are great. And it's the same with everything that you can ever take in your life. You know, if it's just a little, if you're not taking too much
overdoing
of
it. Yeah,
everything, yeah, there might be benefit for him. Like you can drink some wine, sure, it's great. Apparently, you can smoke some weed, it's fine. But the moment it just become a way to escape your reality that you are in order to change it, and it's becoming something that is taking too much of your life, then there is a problem regarding it.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I guess we're done.
I guess we're done. I mean, it goes to what we're saying in this podcast is I think you need to be self-aware of who you are for sure. There's so many interesting paths in life, experiences that you can go through, some stuff that gonna shatters your reality too, that you don't have to count on one person telling you there's like quantum leap or you can manifest whatever fuck you want. I think
Or
life
can
is
find
so,
the love by just doing love attraction or something like
yeah,
that.
some stuff like that. All right. Obviously, that doesn't work. Uh, no, yeah, but I think life is such a beautiful thing that it goes to this idea of that you just need to pay attention about what's surrounding you, and
Yeah.
also trying to understand yourself. I think a lot of people can do it by themselves. They don't need to go through religion, spirituality, drugs, or anything in order to try to find themselves. Sure, sometimes you're going to have to be triggered by some life event, by some experiences that you have throughout your life. But being authentic to yourself and having a knowledge about who you are, if it's something that you're working on, I think it's the best way to be complete on your own by your own path, not by just following a trend or following advices that some people that are not really knowledgeable, but they say they are knowledgeable because their experience, they live through that. I don't think it's just that. I think you need to live life in order to comprehend life and comprehend yourself.
I
You're
agree.
pretty skeptical. Am I doing the
No, no,
guru
I
thing
was
right
just
now?
I think I was thinking uh, I totally agree that self-reflection is important to go through your journey your way, because whatever other people tell you, they're going to tell it from their own perspective, from their own lens. So that thing might work for them. It doesn't mean that's going to work for you. So some people, they take it, they use it, but you need to first look inside instead of blaming others, blaming your environment, and then from there, you can start to shape things around you and what works for you. Or if you can do work internally, you can do that too. But I agree with you. Like it's like you need to do it yourself. Sometimes it's good to have friends too. You know, like to have like one or two people, three people around you that supports you or asks you the right questions, or maybe they have been into that process and they succeeded to a degree, like they get to a point. Like having those people around you is also good too, um because they're not going to tell you what to do necessarily. They're just going to support you. They're just going to maybe give you certain questions that you didn't ask for yourself. But yeah, I mean, it's an individual journey that everybody needs to go. Just mushrooms are not gonna solve it.
Yeah, or rocks,
Or rocks,
crystals.
crystals, or stars in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, dude. Thank you guys for listening to this new episode of the Yes and No podcast. I just wanted to say that thank you actually for supporting us. You can find and continue the conversation on social media. You can find us basically everywhere on at Yes and No Podcast. We'll try to respond to your comments. Don't forget to follow us, subscribe, like us. We are available on every platform. Thank you again for listening and see you in the next episode. I was one of your hosts, Matt, and this was my good friend, Arda.
Good to see you. And a great conversation. See you next time.
See you next time. Bye.